No, one of the reasons I was very impressed with your roster of guests and just finding about you, I'm surprised I don't know about you, um, is that the in the community of people over the last 120 years or so, trying to learn about this inner sensibility of movement from the being Western, the perspective of being a Westerner, um, is really a ambitious challenge because, from my understanding, we lost our connection to ancient Pyrrhic dances, to ancient dance, to ancient. We lost it, so we simply don't have the living connections to ancient rituals and Gnostic experience like Asian cultures do, African culture, other cultures do too. But we did lose it. So we're groping in the dark. We're ascending, but it's kind of a dark ascent in a way. So when someone like Jeffrey Hopkins, who's a great scholar of ritual and religion and language, he comes up with a term like deity yoga. It becomes I'm very interested these days in the idea of pivot. What's the pivot between yin and where can we find some common ground? Where can we find and a term as meaningful and concise and poetically rich as deity yoga is a stroke of genius. And I didn't know that. My good friend is Donald Lopez, the great Tibetan scholar and writer and publisher, and he is very, very kind and patient with me, and he has saved me from a lot of grievous errors. But he always teaches me something interesting. And so when I sent him this article, he reviews my work so I don't fumble too much. And he's like, did you know Jeffrey Hopkins coined this term? And Donald now is spearheading scholarly tributes to Jeffrey Hopkins. So I was very impressed when I saw Jeffrey Hopkins, Jeffrey Samuels, and Scott Part Phillips, my dear friend, and Livia Cohn, and on and on. There were just so many people I've worked with and learned from in your roster of guests. So I was quite impressed with that. And so Jeffrey Hopkins is really, I think, this community building and these kind of conversations give us a chance not to forget Jeffrey Hopkins, okay? Because we shouldn't. And one of the things in your very impressive resume, I lived in Kyoto for 7 years, and they used to have a very Kyoto expression. They'd read somebody's resume or bio and go, I've just read your bio. I thought you'd be hundreds of years old. Which I always thought was wonderful. But what you don't emphasize because you take it for granted, because the way it was done, is the student teacher relationship,
Yeah.
the master disciple relationship. You've had a lot of really good ones,
Mm.
but they really are the crux, the crucible of ancient transmissions.
Mhm.
And so, being in this era of secrets revealed and ancient secrets come out into the world, open ones or closed ones, it's a really challenging thing to remember how we ourselves, Tibetan Book of the Dead, coined by Evans Wentz, deity yoga, comes to us from Jeffrey Hopkins. Can you imagine how much scrambling we'd be doing talking about Cham if Jeffrey Hopkins hadn't come up with deity yoga?
Yeah.
So I just have great appreciation and reverence, even for the people who are aware of these contributions and how they add up. Little by little, they add up for us, increasing our own understanding. So that was my affection for noticing Jeffrey Hopkins.
Oh, wonderful. As this transmission comes west, like you said, there's just so much to try to sort through and figure out. Even a term like deity yoga takes still a ton of work to figure out even still what that means.
It is, and it's intentionally, poetic. It's intentionally elusive. So much of what we're talking about, the paradox is these are specifically not verbal things. These are
Right.
specifically not written things. I write. I've written a monthly column for Buddhistdoor Global for 10 years. This is my 10th year,
Mhm.
and so I've just written my New Year's column. But what I've written about is, how do you explain what was it? What was life like before computers, Bryson? Okay, so what was it like to see a Vajracharya dance in 1100? I mean, what did it feel like? So one of the things, Core of Culture, we're dedicated. Core of Culture is the not for profit I started in 2000. But we are really about helping the practitioners continue. And we'll do anything as long as it redounds to the practitioners trying to figure it out. We're their friend. And the basic way I started this, and I'm an old dancer. I'm an old professional dancer. I danced professionally until I was 44. I told my best friend when I was 17 I'd dance at his wedding. He didn't find the right girl for decades, finally found her at 44. So that was my last performance. But I'm an old performer, and it's very interesting how the world has changed. We live in a very critical time. We're critical of the past. We're critical of earlier people. We're critical of each other. We're all critical. But in the 1980s, um, avant-garde international theater was at its best in decades. It was just a brilliant Pina Bausch, Sankai Juku, Dumb Type, all of these exciting avant-garde. Peter Brooks doing really Philip Glass, all of these people doing it. We all loved each other. We loved each other because we worked the same. That's why we loved each other. But there was this genuine openness and camaraderie and exploration. There wasn't this fear and distrust. And it was a very different time. And it was before computers. So there was also a different kind of fellowship because there was just an accomplishment, as you're saying, just getting somewhere, just sustaining a communication by letters internationally until you finally go, and those are really discovery, hope. You hope the people are there when you get there, the whole 9 yards. But it changed the nature of the encounter and the experience. So I would just say that, yeah.
Yeah, well, I like that you say that because so many people want instant gratification now, but the journey and the work, like before computers, meant something. It created a kind of bond and a kind of trust and camaraderie, like you say, which it's totally absent on computer side of things.
Yeah, it's changed that, and I think I'm older than you. I'm 64. Um, so but now I'm looking at, okay, what can I do? What do I do well? What can I do well? I'm going back to the Himalayas this summer to connect with old friends of mine that I've known since they were teenagers, and now they're the middle-aged abbots of the big monasteries on Ladakh. They're reincarnated masters. They're middle-aged. I'm older, and I've known them forever. And so they're like brothers to me. So I can't imagine. I don't know about you, but can you imagine having ancestral responsibility by birth? I mean, it is, I think it's so heavy, but these amazing enlightened people that are all dancers that I know, they wear it so lightly. Wear it so lightly. Now, some reincarnated masters are really good at meditation and they really like it. Some reincarnated masters aren't very good at meditation and they don't like it. And they don't like retreats and they don't like those things. Some reincarnated masters are really good dancers. And so it's very interesting. You've had a lot of experience with retreat and with meditation and with yoga and with martial arts. And these are all varied ways of bringing the body mind complex together. And I don't know your where you come down on everything's the same. I don't think everything's the same. I don't think yoga and Tai Chi are the same. You've got a body and I've got a body, but they're completely different relationships to the earth, to your own center of gravity, all these things. But they allow you to look at cham dancing, the monastic dance of the tantric Buddhists, and go like, whoa, this is really not rooted in anything. Okay, this is a gyroscopic. You're always off balance. You're tumbling. You're falling around. It's not like Bharatanatyam. It's not like Tai Chi. It's not like Peking. It's not all Asian dancing is pretty rooted. Most of it's really rooted. And then you have this cham, which is just it's a different kind. We one time we worked the final 5 years of the absolute monarchy in Bhutan. And it was a really incredible, privileged experience because we had the favor that a medieval king could give you. We really had access to just about anything we wanted to. But one of the things we did is we put a small camera between the skeletons and the diadem of a mask to actually film the movement that they were experiencing. And they were doing things, Bryson, like throwing their weight forward almost in a buckle and then turning it around. Okay. And then the very classic charm thing where you go all the way right, then you go all the way left, and then you go all the way right, and then you go all the way left while you're making this big circle. It's really a difficult thing to do because it's just so rootless. Okay. And you're just gyroscopically. So we put this on, we filmed it. We couldn't use it in the exhibition because it made people car sick.
Yeah, I would think.
Okay. But it also traced a perfect sine curve.
Oh.
And so really blew my mind. So anyway, I think the opportunities I've had to see Cham up close and to see how it really stands apart from Indian dancing and Chinese dancing in a way. I think it sort of has a Himalayan origin simply by the nature of it. And it's also, for the most part, it's a high altitude dance. Okay, it's a dance of the mountains. It's not a dance of the ocean. It's not a dance of the sea. It's a dance of the mountains. It's a dance of the air. So there are very different aspects about Cham that I think are really worth taking the time to explore.
Yeah. So let's start maybe. So we sort of just jumped in here, but maybe you can tell us like who you are and your background, like how you got into this.
Oh, that's a very good question. I'll give you this thumbnail version. I've been a professional dancer since I was 17. And after a few years of that, I looked at a lot of 30-year-old men I didn't want to become. This was a long time ago. Dancers didn't go to college then. If you went into professional dancing, it sort of meant you didn't go to college. But I was really well educated as a child. I had Latin and Greek and philosophy, all wonderful stuff. So I really wanted to use my brain. So I went back to school when I was about 20. And I went to St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, which is the great book school. We read the great books. That's all you read for 4 years is the great books. The Socratic method, it's all Socratic method. So I read this and I realized, like, wow, there's this Greek tragedy. It's got architecture, philosophy, civic purpose, dancing, poetry. Oh my God, it's brilliant. We don't know what it looked like. We don't know what it was. We lost the connection. Scholars are talking about the texts. That's what we got. And directors want to redo the plays, but we don't know what it looked like. We don't know what the dancing was. We lost that dance. Now, the dance of Greek tragedy is based on the rhythms of the choral poetry. It's a very specific kind of poetry. And that was what the chorus danced to, was the rhythms of the poetry as they chanted. And so I was very thrilled about this when I learned that, like, what? We let this go. And it was basically Christianity separated the body and the soul. All right. And then humanism, Descartes separates the body and the mind. Some people attribute other people for doing that. So by the time ballets really developed, dancing's not connected to the mind. It's not connected to the soul. It's snowflakes and butterflies and whatever you want. But we'd really separated dancing from spirituality and ritual and culture and ancient rites and ancient things and pyrrhicism, everything. So dancing was really bereft in the West. I had a good friend, his name was Grady Harris, and he was a poet. He's from the South. And he came to me one day in his little stack of books. He said, well, I heard you're upset that we lost our connection to the ancient dances of the Greeks. And I said, I really am. And he said, well, there's this thing called no theater. And here's Ezra Pound, and here's translation of no plays, and here's W.B. Yeats. And he gave me 2 translations of no plays books. And I read them, and then he looked at me and grinned and said, it still exists. So I was like, whoa. So when I finished school, I went to Japan. I won a grant to go for 6 weeks, and I stayed for 7 years. And it was an incredible experience. I studied No with great masters. I also studied Buyo. I also studied Zen. I learned about Buddhism. I studied and learned Taoism when I was in Japan. I was there for a long time. I studied different martial arts there. Wonderful, wonderful experience. And then I lived in England for a while. I worked as Chaka Khan's artistic advisor, artistic director, and I did my master's of philosophy at the Laban Center for Movement and Dance. And this is very critical because it really takes dance research seriously and was born sort of from the time that Feldenkrais and Alexander technique and all these early exploratory ways of trying to understand the body in new categorical ways. They all sort of came out of that same period. Now, the Lab and Center for Movement and Dance is now the Trinity Lab and Conservatoire in London. It's really the foremost training center for modern dance, contemporary dance in England. It doesn't have the intellectual bent that the Lab Center used to have. And Roehampton University had an excellent dance research department, wonderful. And last year they scuttled the entire art department, abolished the entire thing. So now the hope where you can even go to study actual dance research methods seriously as a dance researcher is harder and harder to find. But in doing that, I came back to the States. I also did work in complexity theory as a way of understanding what are the underlying emergent dynamics that make things relevant to one another. Why do I go to a no play and leave crying like, oh, I don't understand a word of it? What was the vibratory reality that clearly these actors had mastered? To make a part of the art. Same like a charm dancer. What have they done to change the actual nature of dance? And what I've learned from people like Prajwal Vajracharya, who's a tantric Buddhist priest from Kathmandu, or from these monks, is like, wait a minute. Maybe that is the actual nature of dance. Maybe we've got the compromised one. We've got this word dance. It's like church. I went to a Buddhist church, then I went to a Muslim church, then I went to a Hindu church. I had a great time. Okay. And so it's like the same thing. It's like, when Tai Chi and yoga were introduced in the West, they were called Tai Chi dance and yoga dance. And the great Millicent Hodson, who reconstructed Nijinsky, is also a great practitioner of Bagua. All right. So she noticed things in the history books and in the chronicles of Nijinsky that he saw once a Chinese man holding invisible boxes. Okay, what's a Chinese man holding invisible boxes but Tai Chi? Yeah. So Nijinsky even saw, what is this guy holding? How do you hold an invisible box? What would you think it was if you'd never saw it in Tai Chi before?
Yeah, like mine.
Yeah. So Nijinsky was looking at this like, what is this other thing? So I think when you're looking at Cham or Charya Nritra, Prajwal's dance, you've really got to step out of our comfort zone of what we think dance means. Because, in the Newar tradition, if you say dance means meditation, and you're singing the song, that is the mantra. So it's mudra, mantra, meditation, and dance the meditation. The chant is the mantra, the mudra is the mudra. But the Newar teachings, according to Prajwal, is that the whole body is considered the mudra, the symbol of the mind. And then Prajwal goes further. What's the secret mudra? Nature itself. Get with it. So really this idea of taking a shape, and even so in core culture's work over the last 25 years, we've done really basic things like, let's say Cham instead of sacred Buddhist dance. All right? Because you say yoga, we're not talking about dance. We're talking about something else. We talk about Tai Chi. Well, then we're not talking about dance, or we would have said dance. So we tried to really popularize the use of the word Cham. So people would say, well, it's this other thing. We got to take a minute, and see what makes it different from our dance. But I think, in fact, and I've said this about Prajwal, I've told him too, and when I first saw Prajwal Vajracharya dance, I was like, this is what Isadora Duncan was looking for. This is what Isadora was looking for. And I'm looking at it. This is the whole kit and caboodle. Spiritual purpose, full embodiment, superior mental capacity, high ideals, the noble soul expressed in dance. That's what she was about. So when I saw Prajwal, I thought, well, there's a technique for it. And so one of the reasons I admire your community building, and one of the things that Core of Culture has really worked on, is how do you have the conversation? I have a really good friend, Professor Lindsay Gilmore. She's at University of California in Irvine, and she's very much a contemporary dancer that works in the somatic movement and authentic movement, and she's won all kinds of awards and fellowships to work with monks and nuns in the Himalayas. What do you say when you knock on the door? I'm a somatic movement person from California. I'm like, what the what? You know what I mean? Get some tea. There's somebody out here talking, get some tea, be nice to her, And it's like, but it wasn't a conversation, even though everybody wanted to have one. Okay. So we ended up doing a project with the Ho Foundation from Hong Kong that's been really a wonderful supporter of a lot of the things we've tried to do. We had a big project around Western Himalayan temples, and then COVID came. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to cut the funding. So instead, I got a call from Robert Ho, and he said, can you do something good? Can you do something positive? And I said, yes. He said, do that. Okay, so we took all the travel money and we turned it into speaker money. And we did something called mudra and the diamond spheres, looking at mudra, which are not poses, they're movement. It's a movement of the hands. It's a hand language. And so disabusing this notion that this art historical notion that they're iconographic poses. No, they get there, but that's not, yeah, and arabesque in ballet, it's not a standalone thing, you get there. So we took mudra, but mudra, as far as I can tell, is as old as people, okay, and has never ever stopped, and has evolved from Vedic to Hindu to Buddhist to all over Asia to martial arts to you name it, to dance to mudras everywhere. But we got art historians, Buddhist scholars, Hindu dancers, Buddhist monks, Prajwal, and we had this panel of like 10 people. And each week for 8 weeks, 2 of them got to talk together. And then 2 of them got to respond. And we'd mix it up every week. All right, talking about mudra. Only mudra. Yeah, talking about mudra. But the beauty was we started to find some of the pivot words or terms that allowed a conversation between disciplines to happen. And that's one of the things I think is important for where I'm coming from. I have a friend, Karen Greenspan in New York. She and I are both old dance critics, or I'm an old one. She's just a dance critic. I'm an old dance critic. But we're dance critics, seasoned dance critics. So we've spent decades and decades looking at dancing. That's what we know how to do, is how to look at dancing. And that's a great specialty that's very different from a scholarly approach to something, or even the way you dissect things in terms of research. How do you keep it alive? Yeah, so in bringing a sensibility to it, I think part of it is an appreciative sensibility about helping people understand what they're even looking at. And that's part of the approach of Core of Culture's work.
So that's the big question. You talked about that a few different times. So, like I have a hard time too. Like, what do you do? How do you have a few hours? As when I was on the Alexander training course, they said the same thing. Like, if somebody asks you for a lesson, first ask them. Don't try to explain what the technique is. So we come from this background. So explaining this to people is not easy. And you said something, maybe as a bridge to this, is like that ballet lost the embodiment, or that dance somehow lost this embodiment in the Western mind. So what does that mean? What does embodiment mean? What does disembodiment mean? And
well, I don't know if I would use the word embodiment specifically. That's a new.
Yeah.
No, it's a new word, and there's a lot of new words. Somatic is a new word. Embodiment is a much used word. Somatics, they're being used a lot. I use them, and I really think in terms of, I would say this, in terms of understanding something like Cham, the Buddhist monastic Cham, or something like Prajwal's dancing, that you have various ways in. We got our first big break as Core of Culture with museum shows, and the great curator, Stephen Little, was the one who thought, let's go to Bhutan, who turned everybody down for doing an art show, until Stephen Little went and said, look, we'll do dance preservation and art conservation if you let us do a show. And they said, that's great. Royal government of Bhutan, King of Bhutan. But you got to put dancing in the show.
Mm.
Otherwise, we're going to look like Tibet, and Tibet is dead, and we're not.
Oh.
We won't. That's why they wouldn't let. And the king of Bhutan was brutal about it. He said, "You can't tell the story of Bhutan using Western art history. You can't. It'll look like Tibet." And we in Tibet are categorically different. We survived, they didn't. So, how are you going to show the life of our country? And we did that with dancing. So, that was one of the things. So, it was art history, the museum art world, that first embraced this and gave a lot of validity to the idea of dance preservation because people understood art conservation. There was a big, big leg up. And then there was a big show. Nobody had done a Bhutan show. It was a craze around the world. We did 6 museums in Europe and America, and it was there that people could really see, oh my God, dancing is integral to Buddhism. We didn't get it right, and also this is what the people wanted to see. We don't want to see more paintings that all look like. Show us something new, and very basic understandings. Even the best scholars didn't realize the dancers are the same characters as the paintings. So some of the most basic understandings weren't there about the role of dance. And it's very interesting. A lot of it has to do with temperament and preference, but also scholarly bias in the West over the centuries, without question. Dance is late to the table in terms of an academic discipline you get a degree in. And even that, the struggle for a dance research degree as opposed to a dance practicum, it's a different kind of thing. Training people how to dance, but training people how to do research in dance at different levels is a challenging thing too. So where dance finds itself, where movement finds itself, we were talking about this in friends yesterday. With all of your vast experience, Bryson, are you cornered into what you can do in the marketplace?
Oh, completely.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So, but
There's no marketplace for me.
you and every other great master. Your
Uh,
story is such a classic story. You're like, God, I was just waiting for that. And then Li Po went to the mountain, and your story really reads like that. You have all of this accumulation of merit, all of this accumulation of skill, and then it really is up to you to put your own gloss on it, isn't it? And
mm,
share it with others. Your collection of meditation and martial arts and dancing knowledge is really, I know few people with as much knowledge as you have. So I hear what you're saying. What are your thoughts about making a way in the world? It's a real question for people, I think.
oh yes, I don't have any. It's not for me. It's not been so possible. It's just I don't know. It's been here I am, but I don't really know how I got here in some ways. But I'm not really like it's not a sustainable thing. Like in fact, I spent a lot of time struggling with this, like going, walking this path and really wanting to just leave and go become a monk because I was like, I don't. There's what else? What are you going to do with this? I had some teachers like who taught Tai Chi and stuff. It's like they didn't make a living. In fact, my one teacher took me and showed me how to like get on fund help, special health cares and all this sort of stuff. He wasn't able to really make much of a living. So it's like I've been with a lot of that type of sort of like economically depressed. How am I going to figure this out? And I still don't think that I have. I know that I
Well, well,
have.
I will tell you one thing. You have an exceptional reputation, which is the biggest bit of gold in the marketplace. But I hear what you're saying very much, and I know we're in an age where no actors now have to get part-time jobs, or their no profession is their after job thing. They keep going. Buddhist monks, that the way they've gotten young monks has totally changed. Now you go to villages throughout the Himalayas, there's no children there. If they have any money, first of all, they have 2 kids, not 8. All right. And then if they have any money, they'll send their kid to a good school. So there's almost no kids in the villages. So who becomes the monks as a boy monks? Well, now it's children of abused homes, divorced homes, orphans, feral children. It's a completely different way. So the monks are seriously reconsidering, because the entire monastic structure throughout the Himalayas is remnant medieval everything: medieval politics, medieval society, medieval social structure, medieval everything. And it's not a medieval world anymore. That was the genius of being in Bhutan for the last 5 years of the absolute monarchy. It was a medieval kingdom with a real king that everybody loved. So it was, so part of my problem, Bryson, of that is who can relate to that? I never even heard of any of it till I went there. And now I'm trying to tell somebody about it. And like, well, I even think words like village. What's a village? Nobody knows what a village is. So I think that there's a lot of challenges for us to express things. And I hear what you're saying about making a living. And I think this is why there were these communities that upheld the practices, or designated clans or designated families, and their generational duty was to maintain these practices. And those are tumbling around in other places too. But I do want to encourage you to persevere, because you're in a very beautiful place of being informed. And I think this focus of people finding a manageable way to live certainly isn't only our work.
Right, 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 right.
you know um, and so these are things I'm thinking, and I'm imagining, one of the issues that maybe we'll be discussing in the Himalayas this summer regarding ritual and monasticism is tourism, which is ugly now. It used to be possibly part of a solution, and now it's really a poison in a way. And so uh, uh, what do you do? And what do you do when you used to be the government and you're not anymore? And you sort of are being redefined by tourism agencies, what Buddhism is in the Himalayas. And so I think there are real challenges for all of us, and how we bring our skill base to it is interesting. I come out of the performing arts, so I always think of like doing an event.
That's what I'm saying. You do really well with this. Your personality and your background. This is really nice what you've been able to do and accomplish.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But I think a lot of it is like, I'll tell you one of the things we do. We've got an event here on January 30th in Chicago, Endangered Dances of the Himalayas. And Rajwell is going to dance live with Joshua Proto, who sings ancient Vedic ritual music. Who is this guy? How does it's like? I always ask him, "Do you know Aztec hieroglyphics too? Like, how do how do you get all this? He remembers it all." But Joshua Proto and Proto going to dance. Then we're showing a wonderful film called The Ocean of Mudra, a wordless film showing the ubiquity of mudra in a monastic community, and really giving a lot of insights into what monastic life is really like. And then we're going to show our museum installation, the 4-screen installation, beautiful work that was done with the Bhutan exhibition in 2008 to 2010. Beautiful 4-screen installation. And the original editor of it, I produced it, my team shot it. He remastered it recently. So it's just popping. It just looks so good. So we're going to show these things. But one of the things is like, when I was started to bring these dances to the West and explain them to the West, people are saying, wow, things must really be changing over there. They've got cell phones, and now they got television and computers and stuff. And I'm like, things are changing over here too. Mindfulness is popular. That's basically Buddhism. So we've changed too. Westerners aren't as ignorant of Asia as they used to be. So if you're going to bring together, both sides are evolved from where they used to be. But what I have found is that most people welcome the opportunity to really experience or taste another way that dance is used. To taste a religious experience isn't like the one they grew up with, but something visceral that they can feel in their body. And this may go back to the embodiment, because part of the embodiment, certainly in Tantric Buddhism, the monastic Buddhism, is deity yoga. And as you know, you can start with a little deity in your heart, blow it up until it gets bigger and bigger until it's just the same size as you. And then you blow it up some more. And then the deity's bigger than you, but it's still the same shape as you. And then you go dance. And the instruction is what? Swim along with the deity. swim along with the deity, and it's like, wow, what a teaching. So when you talk about embodiment, well, it's bigger than our body, and not only that, but I mean for you and me to join, you and me are supposed to join in that body somehow. Either I'm projecting it to you, or you're seeing it around me, or you're having a metaphysical experience based on my vibratory projections. That's a new one for you. So I think that whole aspect of the embodiment really goes, one of the things that I have really come, I mentioned about more and more in my writing. It's not extraordinary to them. It's extraordinary to us. Okay. They've been doing these things for centuries. All right. So the projection of an image from mind to mind sounds like, oh God, they're lying. Are they making it up? Is it David Copperfield? They've been doing this for 600 years. They know how to do it. Okay. It's like, it's that mundane for them. Okay. When we first got to work with the monks, the royal monks at Timpuzong in Bhutan, one of the companies like, why are you so amazed at everything we do? And like, well, you don't sleep for 3 weeks while you dance 8 hours a day rehearsing, and then you do 3 days of dancing. And they respond like, yeah. And like, how do you do it? And the answer is, we always do it. We always do it. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. I'm like, well, if you don't do it, they curse you for several generations, stuff like that. But it's like, it rarely gets to that. It really does. And then the other one is you talk about embodiment. The elaborate process of embodying the deity, the protective deity in the kingdom of Bhutan, before you bring it out in a public ritual. And that can take 3 weeks. And one of the things they do is they just do the ritual really quietly, and then louder and louder and louder and louder and louder over the weeks till you bring it out. All right. But there's this way of, first, the monks are all trained meditators. So, like, what makes a good monk dancer? A good monk. Okay. That's what makes a good meditator makes a good monk dancer. So they meditate on an image of Guru Rinpoche as a victorious conqueror, protective deity, surrounded by all the wrathful deities. Yeah. Then they have a totally abstracted, geometric, tantric version of Guru Rinpoche. Okay. Then they all have to meditate on the tantric version of Guru Rinpoche. Right. They do this, and they do this every day from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., walking around this enormous sand mandala of that structure. Yeah, so and the head monk, the J. Kempo, was doing it. They take 4 hours to go around once. Okay.
Wait, it's that big, or they're going that slow?
They're going that slow.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, and they call it the sleeping ritual, the standing ritual. Every monk's there, old to baby. They're all there, okay? 2 to 6 a.m., all this weeks of not sleeping, dancing all day long, okay? Protective deity, abstract version, what the fuck, okay? So they're doing this. Of course they can't stay awake. Of course they can't stay awake. So the little ones are like, and this guy comes by the leather whip, like, well, holy shit. And and the most beautiful music you ever heard that you only hear once a year, written by the Shabring himself, this oboe. Oh my God, the J. Kempo, this roly-poly J. Kempo, light as a feather. You should have seen him dance. Oh my God. Most magical thing. Yeah! Holy shit. So, but the subconscious, what's going on there? The ritual, the deepest ritual, you're locked in there. They actually lock you in there. You're with every single monk in the whole community. Are you meditating? Are you asleep? Are you trying to stay awake? You don't want to get busted. You don't want to get whipped. It's this incredible collect that you do every day and every day and every day and every day for 2 weeks until finally you bring the whole thing out to the public. We forgot how to do that. They didn't forget how to do that. And we forget things too, like we have the notion of individual. Asia does not have it the same way. Right. And old conservative societies in Asia don't function by the notion of the individual at all. So they can osmose and teach and project and share bodily easily.
Yeah.
Another time, these monks were very cocky with us. They came and was like, "Do you want to come see our dance rehearsal?" And we're like, "Yeah, we want to come see your dance rehearsal." And they're like, "Okay, we'll come to Panakazong, and it's at 8:30 tonight." And we're like, "Well, it will be pitch black at 8:30. We'll be there." So we go to the Panakazong, okay, and it's pitch black. And once again, every monk from 80 to 5 was outside in the pitch black dark. Now, as you know, Cham goes this way and then it goes this way, individually and also in terms of the big circle.
Hmm.
Okay, you can drown doing that. Okay, so many robes and you're only 5 foot tall. Holy hell, if you get out alive, good for you. So you've got all the monks in pitch blackness practicing the basic steps of Cham. No, this way. No, wait, this way. And these boys and teens are learning it like they're caught up in a whirlpool, you
Yeah.
know, just energy from the oldest monks and the strongest monks, the best dancers, and they're totally ignorant. And they're in this whirlpool of osmosing how to learn that dance. And they're learning a lot more than a dance.
Yeah. So they are learning it. Sorry to interrupt. They're learning it. What I would call in an embodied way. It's not like here, do this, do that, do that. They're following along and
Yep.
osmosis, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Get in there, kid. Get in there, kid. You know,
Yeah.
it really is, and it's brutal, and it's loving, and it works. And at the end, you know, little kids spin around because they like the way it feels when they're dizzy. But if you can master that kind of thing, and you know, I've gone around to a lot of different monasteries, and really and truly, we're in the very fortunate positions because we can go around and do what we want and see what we want to see. You know, in Bhutan, there's all these villages, but everything's on the full moon. Nobody ever sees anything that anybody else does. You know, no Buddhist monk has seen as much Buddhist dancing as I've had. They haven't had the opportunity to do it like I've had. You know, so or your vast expanse of techniques that you've learned. Few people have that opportunity, you know, to do that. So the question is, what do we do with that? And I've always believed that, well, society has let you go learn all this great stuff from all these great masters, then we've got this obligation to bring back something alive. We've got this obligation, and I think that's what you're doing really well. And the community we're all trying to build is helping to even find the words to share it more broadly. And in the work that we're doing at Core of Culture, you don't want to admit it, but things are dying out. They are going extinct. Practices go extinct. You know, it's ancient dance. It's ancient dancers, is what it is. You know, I used to have when I went to St. John's College, and it's very different now. When I went to St. John's College, there was one non white person there. She was a black woman named Marva Cox. And someone was talking about Baroque music and dance, and that Baroque music and dance had died out. And Marva was quick to correct. She said, "No, no, 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 no. The music and dance didn't die out. They had a revolution and killed everybody who did it." Okay. So I think in another way, we're seeing it now. What's happening to the practitioners, yourself included? But how does Prajwal define a wholly new way of taking a secret form public? That's I think a challenge with a lot of the teachings that are now open, but how do you find the way through that? And so those are some of the things that I think in terms of developing core culture is like, well, if these dances are going extinct, if these communities are genuinely dying out, what's our role? I've already done a lot of documentation and I stand by it and it's really good, but it's harder to do now because of mass tourism and cell phones. It's really hard to make good documentation. So my own personal work is going out more remote to more like oracles and other places with very specific dance and or embodied practices. I have the opportunity to do that. And I think as I get older and where I think I can bring back valid work, you know, I think it's more complicated now with the changes in society to do authentic and meaningful ritual documentation of dances or rituals.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We don't really know what it's going to look like. I guess we just keep for me, I've always just kept putting one foot forward and come what may, I guess. Uh, that's how I got here. That's how I go forward. I don't. But what you're saying is interesting. But the dance though. So okay, I've traveled a lot and studied with different teachers, but I've not come across cham dancing. You are my really first window. I mean, I've
Oh,
researched.
really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So when you say all Buddhist is part, this is part of Buddhism. Is it like explain that to us? So like, I'm not so sure most people know that.
Well, I hope you'll have me back. My book is being
Yeah,
published this year, and
I
it's
know.
called Buddhist Dances, Movement, and Mind.
Yeah.
Um, and it looks at Buddhist dance in 10 different cultures.
Okay, so not just Bhutan.
No, not just Bhutan, 10
Okay.
different cultures. And I look at the role of Buddhist dancing, and it's different in a Theravada culture than a Tantric culture. They're
But there's
completely,
dancing in the Theravada.
they're just not monks dancing. It's not part of their
Oh, I
monastic
see, I see,
ritual.
I see. Okay.
In Theravada culture, essentially, dance is considered like incense or flowers. It's an offering. And what kind of incense you going to bring? The best you got. What kind of flower? The biggest, boldest flowers we got. You see dancing in Theravada, they're doing backflips. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff you would never see in a tantric ritual, but it's banned by monks. But the people won't do it. So actually, Donald Lopez was kind enough to write one of the blurbs for the back of my book. And he was saying, well, it was really but he made the good point. He said, scholars have really modeled ourselves on the Buddhist scholars, you know, and they eschewed dancing in the name of virtue. And he's like, however, this has caused us to do, to not to see that for centuries everybody's been dancing. And so Joseph Houseal reminds us of this, and he takes it down the steps. So I'm reminding it. It's weird. I'm you asked me to describe myself. I'm in the lineage of Isadora Duncan and Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis and these Western dancers who went like, wait, something's missing. There's got to be more to it than this. There's just got to be, it's got to be meatier than this. And I'm in that tradition. And I think the somatic movement people, the authentic movement people, I think they're in that tradition too. They want to go back like, no, there's got to be something juicier, meatier, more real, more giving dance more of a noble stature for self-cultivation than we've allowed it in the West. So I think that's one of the good thing that's happening with the kind of work you're doing and community that we're all building. But you're right, people don't realize this about dance in Buddhism. My book is coming out this year. It's beautiful. It was designed by Jonathan Great. It's being published by Motilal Banarsidass in India, which is a very reputable and venerable publisher of philosophy and religion. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this came through the great dancer Sharon Lowen, the great Odyssey dancer Sharon Lowen. She made this connection. And for the same reason, like, look, if this is philosophy and religion, you need some dancing in it. Because dance and philosophy in Asia are just like this. Dance and expression of philosophy. So I think that maybe you've helped me define my role. Thank you very much. You've helped me. I came here for my marketing consultation with you. Thank you very much. My personal coaching
Very
session.
strange place to come for it, but okay.
Well, you don't even know. You're better man, better than you think you are. But I think just people reminding that dancing is an integral part of Buddhism. You know, and Linda Murray, who's the wonderful director of the Library of Performing Arts in New York at Lincoln Center and the director of the dance division there, she was saying, look, Westerners got the quiet part. We got the stillness. But for Buddhists, it's a whole mind body complex that involves dancing and meditation and mudra. And it's all, we only got half of it. Got to go get the other half. Even just understanding mudra and how Buddhists evolved it from the way Hindus used it. It's fascinating. A really interesting thing. So you're right. I got my job cut out for me. There's no question. But I think having a little book will help. And actually, it was Don Lopez who gave me the original idea for the book. I have all these columns, 120 now for 10 years. I've never missed a month. I'm
Yeah, that's
very
good.
good student
Great.
disciple. And I said, Donald, I've got all these articles. I want to write a book. What should I do? He said, forget about him. I said, what? He said, look, there's no book on Buddhism and dance. There isn't one.
Mm-mm.
Write one. Write one. So I've written one, and there's, as you know, so much more work to do on all of this.
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, so I think that maybe bringing forward that, Buddhism is a repository of the religions that came before it.
Mhm.
You know, unlike Christianity, Buddhism didn't try to abolish everything that came before. It usually absorbed it or incorporated it. So there's a lot of dances. So usually the dance in Buddhism is either an older dance with Buddhism applied to it, or a Buddhist dance with a local tradition to bolster it up. So that's what most Buddhist dances are older than the arrival of Buddhism in their culture,
Yeah.
or there's a layer of dance archaeology in there,
Okay.
you know, of trying to find out. And Buddhism is brilliant, and so is India. If you had to ask me where are the most ancient ritual dances in the world that are safe to go see, India,
Oh, really?
by by a mile. If you really want to go understand and see how ancient culture works, India is a huge, safe place to do that. Um, and so I would just add those couple of thoughts.
Yeah. So, we find the movement thing, like you said, it's very scholarly and very still with the meditation mostly. But then we, so if you're not familiar with Cham, most people at least are familiar with martial arts, Tai Chi. We find like Shaolin Temple, like as kids, we all kind of had that coming through the theaters, Kung Fu theater, and this, and um, so do we find Buddhist dance that's not attached to I don't like to use the word even, but I don't know what else to use, the martial arts in China?
Oh, yeah, yeah, we do. And but the martial arts connection is really an important one. And Scott
Yeah,
Park Phillips is
yeah, right,
such
right,
a
right.
brilliant theorist, and he points out that, in the terms of Shaolin, one of my chapters of my book on China is
Mhm.
about Shaolin, and its impact on movement. That if you were a Shaolin monk, at some point you were probably also just a monk, and you were a fighter, and at some point you probably worked in a Peking opera show. And very often the Peking opera performers were also thugs. They were also mercenaries. They were also, so if you were trained as a Shaolin monk, you could be in a Peking opera thing, you could be a hired mercenary, you could be a monk,
Yeah,
and you were trained for all three of those things. So that, I think, accounts for a lot. And one of the things, if you one of in preparation for the book, my brother John is a great urban planner and cartographer, and so is his colleague Sujan Shrestha of Kathmandu. And one of the things that they showed is, like, if you were to map the influence of Shaolin
mhm,
on martial arts around the world, it's insane. I
right,
mean, really, how did that Buddhism and martial arts come together?
right.
Just unbelievable. So its counterpart in that chapter is Donghuang, the Buddhist caves at Donghuang, in the desert in Western China, where there are 294, is it, caves, and there's just a Rosetta Stone of ancient dancing in these caves.
Mm,
They're depicted. It's just an extraordinary. No archaeological site on Earth has got so many depictions of dancing. But it was the end of the Silk Road.
yeah, yeah.
And the Silk Road brought the whole world to Donghuang. And you had a dance explosion.
Uh,
And then art. All right. And then Shaolin, we're going the other way. We're going to blow this thing out into the whole world. So you look at China and its influence on movement, the depiction of movement, how movement traveled. Everybody brought it to Donghuang. They brought charts of mudra, charts of hand movements, diagrams of dance movements, and they brought them to Donghuang, this great repository of knowledge. Why would you bring your dance?
right,
Why would you? How, we don't think of it that way, but we have to try to think, well, why did they?
yeah,
Why did they bring this nonverbal? I think that's one of the things we're kind of overlooking is, like, Buddhism spread and Tantrism spread non-verbally first. There
yeah.
was an there was an attraction before there was a discussion.
That's
You know,
interesting.
there was a ritual before there was a text. And
Yeah,
so it's very interesting to try to bring back the body, to embody our history.
right.
Let's tell the history. Scott calls my book Somatic History.
Mm,
That's what he calls my book Somatic History, which I like. We got to start using some of these terms,
right.
but But I think a lot of this is done, and you could do very much the same with your vast knowledge of all these interlocking traditions that help people understand in some way their options.
Yeah.
You know, one of the big things I learned in Tibetan Buddhism, or as the monks that I've studied and learned with, is like, you don't all do the same thing. I work with my teacher and I do my trip, and you work with your teacher and you do your trip,
Yeah,
and we're not.
sure.
Yeah, it's like, but then when you realize that, it's like, wow, what's going on up in them hills, man? You know, there's really a lot of higher consciousness being cultivated in communities. So the communal aspect kind of brings us back around to this question of how do you make your living? How do you live in the world? How are the basic needs met so you can do this? You know, and I think that's a really good question to keep on the table for all of this wide community. There are pros and cons to having an academic career. There are pros and cons to having a performing career. There are pros and cons to having a teaching career. But you bring them all together in these conversations and podcasts, and yeah, and it all accumulates into quite a repository of knowledge you have there on your website. I was really astonished.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. This has been amazing. You're really fun. I appreciated this.
It's so nice to meet you, and I want to encourage you. I think you don't know how you just brightened my day when I got your email. I saw what you're doing. I can't believe we don't know each other.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you have touched everybody that you've communicated with. So, so as my friend likes to say, dot dot dot.